Good afternoon. My name is Chris Leak, and I'm the chair of the City County Planning Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First, I'd like to welcome everyone to our April 14th meeting of the City County Planning Board. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. Friday morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. I would like to recognize, I think Councilmember Scipio is in the audience with us again today. I don't see any other council members. Thank you so much for joining. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For all public hearings, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There will be no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless a planning board member asks them a question. For general use district zoning requests, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district being requested. The petitioner may not refer to a specific use for the property. For special use district zoning requests, however, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. Items under Section B of the agenda will require further action by the appropriate elected body, either the City Council or County Commissioners. As such, votes taken today by the Planning Board concerning these items are recommendations that will be considered by the elected bodies during their review of the request. Before addressing the Planning Board, we will need for you to state your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the March 10th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, is there a motion?
Move approval.
Movement approval by Mr. Lamb, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryan. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. I'm now going to call on Mr. Corley to review the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will go ahead and make the board aware that 3 items that were scheduled to be heard tonight are continued to the May meeting. They are B4, which is a request by Andrew Coney and Becky Coney, C1, which is a proposed planned residential development by the name of Kittering Heights, and then C4, which is another proposed PRD by the name of Vineyard Hills. So the first item on the consent agenda is W3518. This is a request to rezone from County RS9 to City RS9, 33.86 acres on the west side of Old Belews Creek Road, north of Brevard Street. This property was annexed into the Winston-Salem city limits on February 7th of this year. So the board's role is to help move this into the city zoning jurisdiction in accordance with that annexation and the general statutes requiring zoning conversion within a certain period of time. So staff recommends approval of this, and be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? All right. No one has signed up in opposition. Is anyone here opposed to this case? All right, seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the motion of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Thank you. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W3518.
We have a motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign.
Mr. Chairman, before Desmond goes to the next item, if I could, because of us being in the little cubbies, If you would, just make sure you're speaking to the microphone, because I was out there at various city council meetings, and whereas before your voice would project and it would probably be picked up anyway, now it's hitting on these glass walls and coming back. So just make sure you're speaking to the microphone.
So noted. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the consent agenda is W3519. This is a request to rezone 2.57 acres from HBS to GBS. The property is on the northeast corner of Peters Creek Parkway and South Park Boulevard. The subject property was part of the original South Park rezoning and development. This was back in the 80s and 90s. This proposal would create a separate GBS district for a drive-through restaurant. Here is the proposed site plan for this development. It would close an existing driveway along South Park Boulevard. The westernmost driveway on this site plan would be closed, and it would modify another existing driveway to accommodate left-turning traffic into the site. Sidewalks are proposed to extend along South Park Boulevard and Peters Creek Parkway. There is also a proposed concrete pad for a future bus shelter on Peters Creek Parkway. This proposed building will be placed in an existing parking lot. This property is the former K&W at South Park, and this building would be placed in the parking lot for that restaurant. The petitioner is looking to take advantage of parking reductions since they're going in a parking lot. They'd like to be able to use both of the buildings and take advantage of the parking reductions in the GB district. This is consistent with the area plan, and staff recommends approval of this request.
We do have one proponent. No one is signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this case? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
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 Opposes? That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W3519.
We have a motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
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 Opposes, same sign. That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, the next item on the consent agenda is W2936. This is a final development plan for 4.16 acres at the southwest corner of West 2nd Street and Brookstown Avenue. For this particular case, I will remind the board that this is in a kind of special two-phase PBS district that requires final development plans to receive their final approval by the city council. So as opposed to normal, when this board would make the final decision, this decision will be made by the city council. It is part of the ballpark master plan area. Here is the most recently approved master plan. It showed this property, which I've highlighted in yellow, as parking for the overall district and an anchor retail store there at the corner of 1st and 2nd Streets. The proposal would replace that parking area with a 279-unit apartment building which wraps around a parking deck. This is one of the last areas of the district that remains undeveloped, and if this plan is approved, the remaining undeveloped portions will be where the ballpark itself sits. The proposed site plan shows 279 units wrapping a 5-story parking deck with access from Fayette Street and Brookstown Avenue. The improvements proposed to 1st and 2nd Streets take into account the planned two-way conversion of those streets. Streetscape improvements are proposed consistent with other development in the district, including the Easley Apartments that were approved recently. And all conditions of the original approval would apply, and there's an additional approval specific to this case that would prohibit freestanding signage. Staff recommends approval of this plan, and I would be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes. You know, in the West End, this has been discussed and looked at, and of course, the master plan was something that we had a lot of hopes about. This particular plot, it seems like a better use to use it as a hotel than an open parking lot, but still a lot of disappointment around what some of the mixed use was going to occur in this area. I saw the lengthy traffic study. Can you interpret that for me, Mr. Corley? A lot of it was older stuff that was showing the one-way streets, which I didn't I felt was older stuff, and I didn't know whether to even look at that or not. But I know that I think within the year it'll be two-way traffic, and that was anticipated in this study. But is it going to make a big difference in the neighborhood?
Are you asking specifically about this development? or are you
What's the
asking-
increase on First Street, Second Street, and Brookstown?
I do not have the exact numbers in front of me, and Jeff Ansler wasn't able to join us tonight, so I can't tell you what the increase will be on those streets.
Well, it was about a 20-page report, though.
I wish it were only that long.
It's 120.
Yeah.
I couldn't make heads or tails of it personally, so I feel a little bit blind about it. I wish either the company was here or Jeff to explain it to us.
I believe it's about 1,800 or 1,900 trips.
Difference
1,800.
1864
Yeah.
total trip.
with two-way traffic.
Well, that's how many
That's the
movements there's
trips.
going to be on and off that piece of property, so,
1,800, yeah.
yeah. That's what I recall.
Well, I think that's the formula, but I think what we've seen is that we're not seeing the kind of volume come off of the apartments that is based on the predictive models. In fact, it's less during these times. I don't know whether it'll continue that way or not. But it does seem like the roads can handle it, so I guess I'm
The
not.
report, as I read it, said that the roads could handle it. That's the way that I read it.
Yeah,
but-
likewise.
And one of the conditions of approval, and I'm assuming, I'm just reading, it's actually in the TIA, is that there would be a $50,000 safety bond posted that would be refunded 1 year after CO if there are some accident issues with the intersection with Fayette First and Second as a result of the project. So again, I believe, again, without Jeff here, I mean, I'm no traffic engineer, but I believe that the TIA bared out that there would not be adverse impacts of the development on the network. And again, there are some other things that are being done specifically related to this project and the anticipated two-way of those streets in the area, and all that's being accommodated in this plan, and additionally, some conditions related to accident mitigation should anything arise.
Yeah, I think my main question was it going to add to stacking when you're headed downtown in the morning? Yeah. I couldn't tell that from the report. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Corley, I had a
Yes.
question. Just in relation to one statement that Mr. Bryan made, if you could show us on the master plan what the opportunities are now with this development, assuming this gets approved, for non-residential leftover, what's left? Because I think you said in the staff report that anything that gets approved subsequent to this needs to have a non-residential component. So I wanted to know where those opportunities are.
Sure. Are you all able to see the cursor on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, so yellow is what we're talking about now, and then this area is what was approved a couple years ago, the Easley Apartments. This building that I'm showing right here has not been reviewed as any kind of final development plan. So this entire area, which is currently a parking lot for the ballpark, could be developed as mixed use or commercial, non-residential. This kind of orange-red building would also be an opportunity for that. Right now, it's being shown as an office building, a 5-story office building. And then there's another kind of extension of the existing parking lot. All of this right now is parking for the ballpark. This could also be potentially developed as non-residential. All of those, if they are not what we're showing on this proposed master plan, they would also have to revise the master plan at the time that they come forward for final development approval.
So they'd have to readjust the parking?
Yes, every time they come forward, there would have to be like a new parking study. And I think I missed this area right here in the bottom right corner. That's also potentially non-residential.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corley. Are there any additional questions for staff? All right. No one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board recommend approval of the final development plan
We have a motion by Mr. Lamb. Thank you.
Second.
Second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Mr. Chair, I believe we would still need two motions on this as it,
Consistency?
It's not a zoning.
yeah, it's a final vote. It's not a site plan amendment. My apologies.
Gotcha. Got it.
Okay, I believe we're going to have a hearing on item B5, so I will skip ahead to item B6, which is W3522. This is a request to rezone 0.77 acre from RS9 to LBL on the northeast corner of University Parkway and Coral Drive. It's a limited use request, so I don't have a site plan to show you. The request would provide some use flexibility on a currently non-conforming site that is recommended for commercial use in the Northeast Suburban Area Plan. The property is also within the University Haynes Mill Activity Center and along the University Parkway Growth Corridor. So it's consistent with the area plan recommendations, and staff recommends approval of this request.
Are there any questions for staff? No one has signed up for opposition. Is there any opposition to this case? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W3521.
We have a motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Thank you. That is unanimous.
I believe we also will have a hearing for item B7, so I'm going to skip ahead to section C of the agenda and start with C2 because C1 is continued to the next month. This is Planning Board Review 2022-06. It is a PRD by the name of Stratford Heights, 13.45 acres, proposed for 46 lots. This PRD has two access points onto existing streets. It's kind of hard to visualize it or explain it, but it is uphill and to the south of the lofts at Little Creek, which is development off of Haynes Mall Boulevard. This plan is compliant with the standards for planned residential development, so staff recommends approval of this proposal.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryan. All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
And the last item on consent is PBR 2022-07. This is a PRD by the name of Bell West. We actually saw a plan for Bell West not too long ago, but this is a change to that plan on 38.56 acres. Now they are proposing, there it is. You can see the approved plan for Bell West with the color on the left and then the proposed plan on the right. The changes would include removal of an existing home that was previously designated to stay. That is right here. They are going to also add 10 lots. So right where that home used to be will be 5 lots. And then I believe they're also going to add 5 lots up here. And then they're going to modify the sewer outfall, which is in the upper right corner of the site plan. This plan is compliant with the planned residential development standards. The staff recommends approval.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Farabee. All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe we're going to have a public hearing for item B5, which is a site plan amendment for Murray Heights. You're going to hear from Mark Allred this evening.
Hope everyone's doing well today. We are here to talk about A property that you guys saw in November off of Murray Road across from Beck's Church Road. The petitioner is Covington Ring Incorporated. It's 20.99 acres located on the west side of Murray Road and again across from Beck's Church Road. The request is a site plan amendment for properties on RM8S to change from a 107 townhome development to an 83 lot single-family residential development. It is located in GMA3 suburban neighborhood. All right. And it's, again, it's already zoned RM8S across from Beck's Church, right north of Chatelain Drive. Aerial, this is a wooded lot. No homes on it yet, no development. This is looking at the property from Beck's Church Road across the street. This is looking north on Murray Road. You can see it's a more residential development, or sorry, more rural development looking north. When you look south, sort of across the from the school bus, you'll see that it's a new neighborhood, more denser development that's across the street there, and you see some more older homes on the same side of the road. All right, from an area plan standpoint, this is a intermediate density residential, which is between 8 and 18 development units. The proposal on this site plan is 3.94, so that's half of what the area plan is calling for on intermediate density residential. This was the old plan that went in front of you from this board in November. Two of the major thing, of course, is the townhome development that you see, the 107 townhomes. But to the west, you'll see a stormwater development. I'm not as good with the pointers, Desmond is. There we go. There's the stormwater development, and you'll see a sewer connection that comes through the tree save area, which was about 700 feet between that and the sewer line. So now what you see, the change in the site plan outside of the townhome going to single-family residential. You'll see that the stormwater device that you saw here is now on this side in the portion of the tree save area. The sewer line is no longer cutting through the tree save area to the sewer line that's close to the creek, which was up here on the index. It's now going south to Iona Street, where you see the manhole right there on the southern part. The other thing that we're going to have a condition on to discuss is that the owner is working with the property owner here to the north about a transfer of 25 feet. So you can kind of see it here. Text. All right. The request does not change the approved use. The approved use in the original site plan did have single-family residential. The request is consistent with the legacy recommendation for encouraging residential infill development. It would increase traffic. So we have single-family, or our data for an average single-family home does 9.57 trips per day. A townhome does 5.81 trips per day. There is an increase of about 173 trips per day. The capacity of Murray Road is around 13,800. With this new development of the increase, it'll be estimated around 10,100. So it would not, it'd have minimal impact based on what was previously approved. And prior to issuance of the additional condition that was put in, if we remember just talking about the 25 feet, prior to issuance of grading permit, developer shall record a recombination with the property of 4826 Murray Road as shown on the site plan. Is there any questions for me? Staff does recommend approval, and it does meet UDO requirements.
All right, I see several questions. I'll start to my
Yes, ma'am.
left, and then.
Yes, I had a couple questions. One is, what is the reason for needing that extra 25 feet? I thought I saw on the site plan that there was an emergency access road. Is that the reason for it?
Well, the emergency acts, basically, I'll let the developer handle that one. But from our standpoint, they're still able to meet all the UDO requirements without the 25 feet, which is, again, you can see where the dotted lines are and then here. They still would have to have their 30-foot type, having a hard time seeing it from this far away. They still would have to have their normal 30-foot type, their 30-foot buffer that's sitting here. But they were able to work with the property owner here to transfer
So
combination.
I'll just add, I can't speak for the developer. My understanding is that they are acquiring that land from the neighbor to give him some additional buffering. The previously approved plan, I believe, showed a 15-foot wide type 2 buffer yard, which would have been required between the multifamily zoning and the single-family zoning. Since this is a PRD, a 30-foot wide buffer is required. So having that extra room from the neighbor to the north is going to allow them to fit in those plantings and have even more buffer space between the access and that property.
Thank you. And the other question had to do with traffic. I don't know if you can answer this, but the issue that people had with traffic when we looked at this last time was the intersection, one of the issues was the intersection at Beck's Church Road,
Okay.
which would be right across from the driveway for this development. And the traffic buildup that happens at usually late in the day, starting around 4 o'clock, there's a large issue with traffic hold up at that spot. And I know this will obviously increase that problem. So my question is, which I think I asked last time as well, is there a solution that DOT has been contemplating? Have they had any new ideas between then and now, really, is what I'm asking? And maybe you don't know the answer, but.
To my knowledge, no. There's not also, from their standpoint, the trip generation did not trigger a need to add anything additional to what the developer has already is going to do as part of the project. So I know from our standpoint, 173 trips sounds like a lot, but from a DOT standpoint, it's pretty minimal.
Yeah, it's not the absolute number of trips that's concerning. It's the issue with the intersection.
Okay. To my knowledge, the answer is no. It's the same as it was with the previous site
Okay.
plan.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Mr.
My question was just, I wanted to make sure I understood this plan compared to the previous plan that was approved. This plan generates 173 more trips per day. That's right?
Correct.
Okay, that's compared to the previous plan that was approved.
So we have to get our trip generation from ITE, Institute of Transportation of Engineers. They do an ADT based on the average number of townhomes in the United States. The average number of townhomes in the United States is 5.81 trips per day. The average number of single-family residential is 9.57. So even though it's less homes, it's going from 107 to 83, it's still generated more traffic.
Right, which represents about 1% more traffic on that road.
Yes,
Yep.
that's
Okay.
correct.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
How does moving the stormwater affect the tree save?
Let's go back, if you don't mind, so we can look at. So the tree save area, at one point on the site plan, the stormwater did not go into it at all. However, there was a sewer easement. You can see that right there. So that was going to cut a swath through the entire group from the sewer line to where the street is here. So what they did is they found a cost of sewer, inflation, the cost of sewer has become astronomical, the installation. They were able to work out a deal with a neighbor to the south. Let me go back to this one. On Iona Street, they were able to put in stormwater here, but they don't have the easement. The sewer easement's no longer cutting through. So, but to answer your question, they were able to still meet the minimum tree save area. From the street to the stream is about 800 feet. So it's a long way to the stream. And trees by their nature are, they're water hungry. They drink a lot of water. So the trees, as far as this part of the area in between developments, actually, there's more trees in between. apart as there was more trees taken out closer to the street.
So the area equaled out?
It basically
Get rid of
equals
the
out,
easement?
yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
Sir, Mr. Fairby.
And I was just thinking, I grew up very close to here. I went to Northwest Middle School right up the street. So I'm very familiar with Beck Church Road. It backs up pretty badly, 5 o'clock traffic and whatnot. I do think with this project, as we've just discussed, it won't add a huge number of trips, but I do think this is probably an area that DOT needs to add to their list of studies. In the area, there's more land out there that probably will be developed, which just means more people coming through every day.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for staff? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I will open the public hearing. We do have one proponent and one opponent, unless there are others that have not signed up. So I'm going to ask, I think this is Nikki Parker. If you would approach the podium, please. And for the record, if you would state your name, your address, and your zip code.
Okay. My name's Nikki Parker. Address is 2806 Renolda Road, number 172 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27106.
Thank you. And what would you like to tell us about your case?
So basically, like Mark had just mentioned, everything is basically the same as far as the general layout and everything. It's just going from the townhomes to the single-family homes.
Okay.
Are you a representative of the developer?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. For
Context clues,
Alcoa
that's fine.
Properties, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry. And this is the first time I've ever been here, so I'm kind of nervous.
Welcome. You've done a
Thank
fine
you.
job.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Parker?
I've got a question. It's just a sort of a general question.
I'm sorry, Ms. Smith, could you move to the mic or bring it to you?
Okay, is this better?
Yes.
All right. I just have a general question. With the way the housing market is today, the pressures are, what switched the townhomes to the single family? Was that market demand or?
I believe so,
what was
yes, ma'am.
available, or-
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any additional questions for Ms. Parker? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak in support? All right, seeing none, I will now turn to the opponent. I have Rebecca Silberman, I think. Thank you. If you would please approach the podium, Ms. Silberman, and state your name, your address, and your zip code for the record, and tell us what you would like us to know.
Rebecca Silberman, 5315 Shadowlawn Drive, Winston-Salem, 27106. Thank you all very much for hearing from me. And I'm a relatively new resident, and I wrote you all an email explaining some of my concerns, so feel free to read that when you have a moment. In general, I am for the change development, and I think I wanted to bring up some of the same concerns that you're all bringing up. Traffic on Beck's Church Road and that new intersection that we'll be developing, so thank you for bringing that to DOT. I think it continues filtering onto Shadowlawn where I am and then onto University, and there's just a lot of clear areas where the single lane roads can't really accommodate the amount of traffic that is building. So as we're all expecting, it will continue growing, which is good, and I just want to see the infrastructure increase at the same rate that housing developments are. I talked to Mark earlier this morning. He was very helpful, and my property abuts the development and part of the tree save, so I was disappointed that some of the tree save would be removed, and now kind of understand that it's a benefit that the sewer is not going over there, especially since there's a creek that runs along the west north to south, and it, eventually feeds the Yadkin. So my concerns are around, once the development is there, how stormwater will be maintained, wanting to make sure that their plan is robust enough. It seems like it's meeting the requirements, so, I'm happy with that. And then further, I just want to ask the developer to potentially reach out to the neighbors. I would love to know a timeline for the plan. I expect to hear a lot of clear cutting and construction, so just wondering how long that will be. And I also want to advocate for, I don't know if this is a standard thing, but I'm concerned about, construction debris and pollution, and that going into the groundwater, and I don't know if there's a way to have the developer submit a plan for approval or anything, but I would be interested in reading it. I think that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Silburn. Is there anyone else here opposed to this case? How much time is left?
9.5 minutes.
We have 9.5 minutes left. If anyone else would like to speak in opposition. All right. Thank you both for coming. Seeing no other participants, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Farabee. Any further discussion? All in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
And Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3521.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Farabee. Any further discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That is unanimous. That does pass. I would ask staff to please remember what we said about referring this to DOT. That's very important. Thank you. Thank you both for coming.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I think the next hearing we're going to have is for item B7. Gotta find my cursor. Elizabeth Collier is going to make the presentation for that case.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I hope everyone is doing well. The case we have before us this evening, W3523, our petitioner is David and Jan Properties, LLC. The site is just under 10 acres, located on the west side of South Peace Haven Road, which is just south of Foxdale Drive, and the rezoning request is for special use rezoning from RS9 for a portion of the site to be RS20S. Our legacy map shows the location of the site in GMA3 suburban neighborhoods in the West Ward. On the location map, you can see the typically the rezoning area is all in yellow. The reason you're seeing kind of a mint green in that outline is because that is all floodplain for Muddy Creek. So you can see it impacts a good portion of the rezoning request area. And this is the aerial view. The yellow outline is the rezoning request area to RS20S. This would be a view on South Peace Haven Road looking north, more neighborhood areas that direction. And then looking south, the access point for the subject site is in the screen there. And again, more kind of rural feel in that area. This is on Peace Haven Road looking west from the access driveway that is on the site today. And this, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back for a second. So one of the proposed uses for the site is a special event center. And to the right of the property, there is adjacent residential areas that are also zoned RS9. So the petitioner, I'll show you on the site plan in a minute, but In this area, there will be alternative compliance buffer yard and proposed opaque fencing in the area to mitigate some of those effects of this existing drive aisle to that neighborhood. And this is the neighborhood that's to the north, located on Foxdale Drive. It's existing today. And this is generally the view from Peace Haven Road. If you get kind of above the berm, you can see there's sort of a lake feature and a building existing on the site. And this is looking west on Peace Haven Road. So this is the western end of the property. The silt fence that you see at the lower part of your screen is basically the rezoning limits on the western portion of the site. So the land beyond will remain in RS9 zoning if this proposal is approved. This is an existing building on the site. My understanding is this will be used for a special event center. And this is looking south. This is a view looking towards South Peace Haven Road to the east, and there's like sort of an existing lake feature with a waterfall, some natural areas, a general rural feel of the site. And I just wanted to show this view. This shows the access point for the water and sewer available to the site, and this is located at the end of Foxdale Drive, and this is kind of the southwest view of the existing site. Not all of this will be in the rezoning, but a portion of what you're seeing here will be in the rezoning request. The area plan map does recommend, of course, the single-family use of the site, RS9 with 0 to 9 units per acre, but with the impacts of the floodplain from Muddy Creek, it's not really practical to develop that many homes on this site. This is the site plan submitted by the petitioner for the rezoning request. You can see the existing access point, the driveway that is fairly close to some residential RS9 zone properties to the north, and that is the location where there will be proposed opaque fencing and additional landscaping. For the special events center, all areas and uses of the site have to be set back a minimum of 40 feet from all residential property lines. So that's being met. And additionally, a type 3 buffer yard must surround the entire rezoned property area. You can see the existing, on the western side of the site, there's the existing a chapel, if you will, building with a special event center parking. There's a T turnaround that was required by our fire and WSDOT folks. And to the north of the existing structure, there's a proposed walkway and pavilion area. And then you can see some extra parking between the lake feature and the existing drive. And all the use-specific standards for a special event center are being met on the site, as well as the tree save. And so it meets UDO standards. So the staff's analysis is that less intense uses would be allowed on land that is currently located within a floodplain and not really suitable for residential development. The proposed development would allow for the preservation of some natural features. A lot of large canopy trees are on the site, and environmentally sensitive areas that are recommended to be preserved by the area plan. And the proposed site plan shows existing and proposed development that is located away from the existing adjacent residential properties, and then with buffering to mitigate some of those impacts of the driveway to the north. And I'll be happy to answer questions or go back. The site plan does meet UDO standards, and staff recommends approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Yes, sir.
The silt fence that's already there, is that just a?
I'm not able, I don't.
Okay.
I know that there's construction going on, as you could tell there, so I believe there's a grading permit already active for the site, and of course, one would be required for any future development.
It's my understanding, and the developer or his representative can confirm this, but I believe that there was an active grading permit. There was a large amount of fill that was put on the property up closer to Peace Haven Road as a result of some of the DOT projects they wanted to fill in up close to the road, I believe, for some type of a future house or something. And then also they constructed that pond, I don't believe was there. That water feature has also been added over the last 5 to 10 years. So I'm not exactly sure why the silt fence is there, but I can imagine it probably has something to do with one or perhaps both of those things.
Thank you.
Ms. Donegan?
Yes, Ms. Collier. Is there any other RS-20 in the area? I couldn't tell from the map. I didn't see it, but,
Not in the immediate area, no.
okay.
To the south is the county line, so I believe to the south there are some areas with RS-20, but not in close proximity.
Okay. Another question regards that access road. Is it intended to remain gravel?
Yes, the site plan shows the
I
intent.
thought it was going to be improved, but I just wanted to
It will be
confirm that it was
improved.
going to be gravel.
It will have to be improved to maintain fire code standards and widened, so yes, but it is to remain as shown gravel.
Okay. And then third, is there a further process, assuming this rezoning gets approved, where they need to get a special use permit for the special event center? Would that be an additional step, or would this zoning approval allow them to do the special event center?
So the approval of this site plan will take care of the approval of the use for special event center on this site.
Okay.
And that's the reason for the RS-20S.
Right. So if there were any conditions that needed to be put on and the petitioner was agreed to that, that could be done through this process.
Correct. And there already are, I didn't read them all out, but they will have to get commercial driveway permits approved by WSDOT and NCDOT. They also are going to have to record a buffer yard easement on adjoining property as identified on the site plan to meet some of the buffer yard standards along that drive aisle where feasible and shown. And again, the floodplain development permit, which there is already one active on the site for what's going on, they would have to upgrade and add more things to that to address any other development on the site with a floodplain development permit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Mr. Bryan?
Yeah, you mentioned fencing.
Yes.
How tall?
On the site plan, they have shown a 6-foot tall opaque fence, but I think the petitioner might speak to being willing to do more than that, but I'll let the petitioner answer to that.
And can you show, again, run with your pointer, I hope I can see your pointer, where that fencing, does it go all the way around that development down, what is it, Foxdale?
I believe, and it's hard for me to see from here, so I apologize, I believe it goes all the way down to about here.
So all those houses would then have some kind of, besides the type 3, they would also have a 6 or so foot fence.
That's what's shown on the site plan, correct?
Does the petitioner also own the land that is on Peace Haven?
Yes, the petitioner actually owns a great deal of property in that area. You can see to the west and the north on the location map. They own everything to the north other than the homes on Foxdale. They own what's adjacent to Peace Haven and also to the rear down to Muddy Creek.
Okay, so.
I was going to say, just to clarify, the property along Peace Haven, I believe, has been transferred to a son, but I believe it's in the family.
Okay, the main thing I wanted to, now that property is retaining that same, what is it, RS9?
That's correct.
So there's potential there for residential, and it's the feeling of the staff that this won't get in the way of that residential development that'll occur, because, I mean, I mean, that Peace Haven's got a huge intersection there. The land across the street's for sale as well. I assume there will be development in the future, correct, along there in this?
I think the petitioner can better explain their plans for that
Okay.
land, but my understanding is with the floodplain, again, there's very limited buildable area.
Now, traffic on the road, any look at the traffic that will be affected? The curve with McGregor has been an accident-prone spot. And I realize we don't have Jeff here again today, but it is a known traffic issue. Is there a limit on the number of people that will be down in this area? So when they come off, that, you know, what's going to happen with traffic or whatever? Has that been looked at? Have you looked at that?
We did reach out to Jeff Fansler directly for a parking trip generation. And his thought was, with the size and scale of the buildings proposed, and also intermittent, activities for special event centers, he calculated 40 trips per day as sort of an average daily trip generation rate. But that could be fluctuated, and then, obviously outdoor area doesn't have occupancy, but the buildings are proposed to be about 600 square feet, or the structures in size. So the building occupancy there would be limited on some level. And then again, all areas of activity on the site have to be at least 40 feet off of any residential property line, and also buffered.
In an event center, is there any restriction about outside versus inside in terms of sound and things like that?
No, there's not in the use-specific standards, no.
Any hours of operation?
It all gets, no, I mean, there is nothing in the use conditions, but it would all get back to, this is still located within the city, and it would get back to city code regarding noise regulations and those kind of things, but there wouldn't be any type of cap on the number of folks inside versus outside. Obviously the use conditions have a square footage limitation for buildings for a special event center, but there's not anything specifically related to a cap on the number of folks. And again, as I just stated a second ago, there is no limit in the use conditions related to noise and those kind of things. Hours of operation, it would all be handled via the city code. And
So what is that, 10:30 or something like that, noise stop?
I hate to state what it is. That seems right, 10:30 or 11, and there's some decibel limitations, and it's after a certain hour, not before another, and not before a certain hour in the morning, but I don't know exactly what it is.
It's been about 25 years since we advocated for that noise awareness. I can't remember it either, but it is something like that. Thank you. I think that gets my list.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you for the questions. Anyone else have questions for staff? All right. Thank you so very kindly.
Thank you.
All right. We'll have a public hearing. We do have two persons here to speak in favor and one against. As a reminder, each side will have 12 minutes. For proponents, we have Steve Causey and David and Jan Bradford. If you would please approach the podium. State your name, your address, and your zip code for the record.
Yes, sir. Steve Causey, Allied Design, 4720 Kester Mill Road, Winston-Salem, 27103. Desmond or whoever's driving, could we get back to the overall zoning, the first page of the staff report, or can I do that? So I could do that. I may need some training. There you go. That's probably it. So we did, our office worked with Bradford's, the petitioners, to prepare the site plan. Elizabeth's done a great job. I got just a few points to make or clarifications to add. David Bradford will follow me to speak a little bit more to the history of the property. His wife Jan is here, and their daughter Molly, as well as some other family members. There is some history. David can elaborate a little bit more. It's probably hard to discern, but there are a fair amount of improvements already on the property. I think the improvements probably started in the 60s when there was actually a zoo or a circus on the property. A lot of the brown rectangles that you see on the map were existing structures. They're no longer there, but they were there at some point in the past, as well as the gravel road coming down to the property. So then more recently, in the past couple of years, you probably noticed when they tore the bridge out from over Highway 421, this is where the bridge was disposed of. There was a large hole, a large excavation, and over a period of a couple of years, I think the DOT contractor used the property for a borrow site as well as disposal of the bridge. So just to emphasize, it's a back zoning in terms of residential density. The RS20, if it were developed as residential, would allow around 20 lots versus the 48 under the current zoning. Obviously, the rezoning request to the 20 would accommodate the special event center, which does begin to bleed into some of the high-intensity commercial uses. Elizabeth's indicated we've met all the conditions of the special conditions for special event center. And we kind of feel the traffic noise and impacts to the neighbors from the special event center are arguably less than would be created from a residential subdivision. The daily bus traffic, the Amazon traffic, the weekly trash pickup and recycling, emergency services, responses, arguably could all be more of an impact to the neighbors than we feel like the special event center could be. Elizabeth pointed out the trip generation. Jeff Fansler certainly helped us with that, but we anticipate about 40 trips a day versus about 460, I think the staff report alluded to, that would be allowed under the current zoning. We would also expect that those trips are at non-peak hours. They're probably afternoons, weekends, when you're not experiencing the morning and AM and PM peaks along Peace Haven. So hopefully at least less conflict than probably would occur with the single-family development. Some work kind of started on the property under residential zoning and permitting. The chapel's been constructed. They've done some grading. There was an erosion control permit issued for the property, issued by city county inspections. So there is an active erosion control on the property. Kind of in the process, they realized maybe some of their plans or intentions would kind of segue into a commercial use. So that's what brought them in here for the rezoning. So clearly there has been some improvements on the property. Most notably, there has been some lighting installed. That was installed under the residential district. We realized going to the commercial district or to the rezoning, we will have to come back and obtain commercial permits for the building, the parking lot, and the lighting. A lighting plan, of course, would be required. A word about the parking. We did intentionally kind of tuck the overflow parking in up and against the slope. We tried to kind of hide it in that crescent up there. We hope it's not visible. There is a question about buffers. The fence, I think, currently stops about halfway through the Earls property to the north. We're certainly here if there's concerns in that regard, or we could add additional buffering or fencing. We're all ears, certainly would consider that. It is proposed to be the 6-foot-high opaque shadow box fence that meets the alternative compliance under the buffer yard standard. So probably would like to keep it at 6 foot. Above that kind of gets into some permitting, but certainly we'd be willing to consider some additional fencing. So that's all I have, and I'll let Mr. Bradford speak. So any questions now, or I'll be close by. So.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
There's about 7.5 minutes.
All right.
Cut into my time, right? Thank you for letting us speak here today. My wife and I live at 5448 Kingsbridge Road, Winston-Salem, zip code 27103.
Thank you.
2 of my 4 children are planning on building their homes on the D&J property connected directly to the parcel we are proposing for rezoning. So we also live at Kingsbridge, and our land connects to that. My son Andrew and his wife live directly behind our home at the end of Foxdale Drive. They are the 2 that have orchestrated the letter of opposition. Okay? Unfortunately, Drew keeps to himself these days and has inaccurate understanding of what we're trying to do is keeping this an intimate rather than an excessive event center. So, as he claimed, we hope one day that he will return to his family, but at this time, we respect his privacy. When we started this, as Steve mentioned, this was a zoo. It was back in the 60s, from at least 60 to 64. The grounds were totally dilapidated house, outbuildings, rusted fence, chain link fence with barbed wire on the top of it, and the land needed much care. So once cleared and stable, we built a small natural spring-fed lake, a waterfall, planted flowers, trees, and seeded the grounds with the intention of preserving the land's nature. We cleaned the filth completely out, brought in dirt, raised the elevation of approximately 5 or 6 acres out of the floodplain, along with we required necessary permitting, as Steve mentioned. This area makes up roughly 10 or 12% of the total of the D&J properties and of the parcel that we're asking for rezoning. The remaining acreage will continue as structureless hayfields with crops being donated to local cattle farms. We use the existing drive, which has been established for at least 65 to 70 years. Joseph Bradford, my younger son, plans on building his house at the top of the hill where we had the dirt go in to help build the Peace Haven Bridge. And then DOT, Blythe Construction brought that back in and refilled it. And that's 532 South Peace Haven. We will both share the drive and entrance and exit the property, so we'll share that together. Our intention first and foremost has been building a family sanctuary. We are a family that likes to give back to our community, as did my son Andrew, who actually helped me clear all of the land in the beginning of the transformation. The little chapel that we're in process of building is all done by local artisans, with most materials coming from North Carolina. The stained glass custom made in East Bend, art design from a local artist, which was hand painted, oak timbers that cut from forests close to Elkin, and includes trusses, doors, flooring, and window framing from that wood. We have had activity on the grounds with our friends and relatives, taking care to never violate or disturb any neighbors. We express our intention and our understanding as fellow neighbors during our 3-hour neighborhood open house held March 27th. We had shared with them our phone number, email address, and informational website is available through this process, even after the open house. Any neighbor that has concerns, we are happy to do anything we can to help or accommodate within reason. It was stated in the opposition that we were in it for the money and did not care about the neighbors. If that were true, we would have sold the land to a developer, which could have put approximately 48 homes on there. So that was not our intent. Our mission is to be good stewards of the land, wildlife, protect our neighbors, and with appointment only for scheduling guests. and to keep it in intimate gatherings, not large. This is truly a blessed place. We invite each person that has had any doubts to call us and schedule a time to visit this unique, peaceful place. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Bradford, there's a gate down at the end of Foxdale,
Yes,
and that goes onto your property?
it goes straight into our property.
Okay, is there any intention to use Foxdale as an entry to
No,
this?
we will not. We have, but we will not.
You will not? Is that
That,
on the site plan, does that preclude using Foxdale as an entrance to the property?
it does not include it.
It's not shown because Foxdale isn't even adjacent to.
Immediately to it?
Correct.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you had those concerns, I mean, I believe you could probably, as long as they were willing, I mean.
Yeah, you're willing to
have a condition.
stipulate that?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
we would. And the fence, by the way, I put that in. And we let my son and his wife pick out what they wanted. So it was their idea to do the farm fence.
Yeah.
So, because we did have a problem. We had a problem with people without the fence coming in, camping out, making fires. I mean, just amazing. So, but the farm fence has stopped that. Okay?
Thank you. Any additional questions? All right, thank you. How much time is, thank you, Mr. Bradford. How much time?
Thank you.
A minute left for the proponents.
Okay, we have a minute left if anyone else would like to speak in support. Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, if that's the case, I will now turn it over to the opposition. We have one person signed up to speak in opposition, and that is Sharon Earls. You would please approach the podium, state your name, address, and zip code for the record, and share with us your opposition, please.
Sharon Earls, and my address is 5410 Foxdale Drive, Winston 27103. My house is the third house on Foxdale. So the back of my property is adjacent to the access road, the dirt road that you saw. And I've had a lot of traffic up there, but that's not the worst. It's the fact that people stop up there and they're staring down at my property. There's no buffer zone, there's no fence, there's no privacy now because of that. I actually had people actually walk through my property, and I only assume it's to look at the new structure going up. I also have more traffic on Foxdale because they have gated off that dirt road and aren't allowing any traffic to go that way. So everybody that's coming to this new structure is using Foxdale Drive. And they're turning around. There's only, 9 houses down there. So the neighbors, the community, we know everybody. We know their vehicles. We know who's coming in and out. And since this has been going on, I don't know some of the cars coming in and out, and it makes me feel vulnerable, especially with people in the back of my property walking around back there and just standing there. I mean, I've stood there and locked eyes with people up at the road, and it makes me feel really uncomfortable. I wish that there would be some kind of a buffer. There is no fence. There's nothing back there to buffer any traffic going in and out or people walking up and down. There's already been parties at the new structure on that property down there. Music until 11 o'clock at night. And I mean, I can see the structure from my house. If I, look out the window, I can see it. And there's been, teenagers down there making fires. There's been parties with music already at the structure, and that's been a nuisance. It's already happened several times. And I would prefer for not to be a disturbance. the lamp posts that are now on that dirt road are so bright, they shine right into my back windows. My entire backyard is now just, I mean, it's so bright, you can see anything back there. And there would be a time where I would have anywhere from 10 to 18 deer, you know, coming through that neighborhood, even in the front of my property. And now, nothing. There's no deer out there at all. And it's sad, you know, but it makes me nervous. It makes me feel vulnerable. I feel like it's going to lend opportunity to criminal trespass. I feel like it's going to possibly cause problems, you know, that, you know, like we can't foresee, like maybe a fight, you know, at one of these events, you know, that we're going to have to wind up calling the police, you know, more often down to our area. But I think I speak on behalf of my other neighbors as well. I have some new neighbors that are to the left of me, and unfortunately, they're from Thailand, and they don't speak good English. And when speaking with them, they wanted to be here today, but they couldn't because they didn't feel like they would get their point across that they didn't want this either. And they're even closer to this area than I am. But it's been a problem since it began, with just strangers coming in and out and music being played loudly. And it concerns me for when we have a bigger venue there, you know, how are we going to protect my property? How are we going to protect my property values? You know, I've been there for nearly 20 years, and I've worked steadily to improve and increase my property value. And I feel like having this kind of commercial property is just going to bring that down. And that concerns me, you know, because at some point it's going to be my children's inheritance. And I want the property value to be able to be maintained. So I think that's all I can say.
Any questions from Ms. Earls? Yes.
And I didn't catch the last name. What was it?
Earls,
Earls.
E-R-L-S.
Now, I may apologize. My truck may have been one of those strangers. But that road going in is above your home?
Yes, well.
Is it elevated above your property?
It is, because I have a hill. The back of my property is a hill.
What effect will this fence have in protecting your property from strangers or whatever?
I'm really not sure. It depends on how well they do a fence. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if they do it from one end to the other, then possibly it would be, you know, useful. But if they only do a portion, then they're still leaving portions of it open.
Yeah, okay.
Any additional questions for Ms. Earls? All right, thank you so much, Ms. Earls.
Thank you.
How much time is left?
Mr. Chairman, there's 7 minutes.
We have 7 minutes left for anyone else who would like to speak in opposition. All right, seeing no one, I will declare the public hearing closed. Any discussion, or would anyone from the board like to make a pleasure? Yes.
I wanted to make a couple of comments. My concern about this is related to the ordinance itself that allows special event centers in residential land. I remember when this got approved several years ago, I think it was UDO 271 or something like that. It also had microbreweries as part of it. And I had a concern about allowing this in large lot development, starting with RS20 and going up to ag. The reason being that there's a potential to impact other residents around it. And I see this as an example showing that. But my concern here is even greater, because what the request is to rezone RS9, which does not qualify for this use, to really for this sole reason of getting this use. And to me, that undermines the whole intent of the ordinance. And and, you know, there not being any other RS-20 around here, I think supports that fact. And Mr. Bradford stated that there could be 48 homes put on this property, so it can be developed residentially under RS-9. So I just see this as not compatible with the UDO for that reason. The other issue, if I could just.
Sure, yes.
Has to do with not, under the ordinance itself, there are no limitations, as an answer to Mr. Bryan's questions about hours of operation and about numbers of attendees. While this chapel only holds, I think, 48 people, and there's a small parking lot, the layout of this land allows a tremendous amount of potential overflow parking on the grassy areas. And, you know, just for comparison, if you think about Bethabara, for example, that it has a small area that hosts very large events with overflow parking on grassy areas, you can get a huge number of people depending upon the event. If it's not going to use the chapel and it's an outdoor picnic type event with music, I can see this as being particularly impactful just because of the layout of the land, which would allow that, and the inability to control it.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Donegan. Yes.
What will they have to, just like the lighting? So they're going to have to abide with the current lighting ordinance. So will that change? Is that a full cutoff fixture on top of these fence posts, or?
I don't want to say exactly what the code says, but they will have to comply with the UDO for the commercial lighting standards dealing with parking lot lighting. Any exterior lighting will have to meet the commercial code, which I believe, it has a maximum foot candle, and I believe it does specify that even lights like this have to have full cutoff fixtures directing the light downward. So yes, they would have to meet that. It's my understanding, and this gets back to when Dan Dockery was still here, that he was discussing with Mr. Bradford, and I believe that the accessory chapel was built under the residential code because it's on residential property. But it's my understanding that the workmanship and the methods that have been used it was overbuilt, so it would meet commercial code when and if they decided to bring this rezoning through. But yeah, the structures would have to meet commercial code. The lighting would have to meet commercial code. Obviously, we've discussed parking and buffer yards and all those kind of things. All that would have to meet the standards.
And obviously, we don't decide cases based on intentions, because who knows who will own this 15 years from now. But what does prevent a music festival of 1,000 people from meeting on this site, if it changes hands?
Theoretically, nothing.
Okay.
But I also would call your attention to the map, and again, that it's kind of mixing apples and oranges. If you look at the map in front of you, and if you notice where the Winston-Salem zoning and Forsyth County zoning line is, if this property were located 3 to the south, and it was in Forsyth County zoning,
right,
and they met one of the 4 statutory findings for ag under the value-added provisions of the North Carolina General Statutes, you can essentially do anything you want to on that piece of property. And again, I'm not saying that as a justification on why to approve this, but whenever you're looking at that close proximity, there's nothing that would prevent anyone in the Forsyth County portion that would qualify under ag exemption of running a special event center and wedding venue and corn maze and if they're growing grapes, having a winery with a tasting room. There are lots of things that value-added provision brings in the county zoning that folks within the city zoning don't enjoy, so to speak. So on these large lot, kind of legacy farm areas, that was one of the reasons why the special event center use was put in there, and one of the reasons why it was on the large lot zoning districts and not the smaller lot. Now, in this case, whenever the rezoning was probably done in 95, you had, you looked at the kind of the lot sizes that were out there, you looked at the surrounding area, and I'm sure RS9 was assigned to this area versus ag or RS40 or 20 based on kind of the lotting pattern that was out there and the presumption that it would probably be developed residential. But, it's been some form of agriculture, I'm sure, for the last 40 or 50 years with wheat fields, hay fields, whatever. So that's, again, I'm just trying to explain some of our thought process in why the ordinance was drafted to begin with that allowed the use in the RS20 district, and again, some of the rationale behind the recommendation.
Right,
for
an
approval.
event center is not a permitted use in ag zoning by right.
Correct. I believe you have to get a special use permit in ag, RS40, RS20, any of those. But again, under the value added provisions of the general statute, if you have a bona fide farm, you can use those facilities that you have on the site in conjunction and not have to get the special event center permit if you have the bona fide farm exemption.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to just clarify, while Chris was talking, I did research the lighting ordinance requirements. And Clarence, you're absolutely correct that this facility would have to have light levels that were not exceeding 1/2 foot candle at the property line or at the right of way. And additionally, parking lot lighting should utilize full cutoff LED bug-rated fixtures, and it goes into the detail of what rating that would be. And it also specifies that poles can't have a height above 30 feet.
All right, so from Mrs. Earle's perspective, this is a light on top of a post on top of an elevated site. Will she see a light bulb?
It says, it further goes on to say, the lighting shall not be mounted greater than 32 feet above grade, including any base or mounting structure. So we'd have to evaluate the height of those appurtenances.
A question
Yes,
for Mr. Murphy. Where's the Beltway going in relationship to this property?
I'm going to look out in the audience and see if anyone knows. I believe that it is to the west.
Is it following the Muddy Creek through there?
I believe it does.
Will it be on the side that we're talking about, or will it be on the other side?
It would be on this side, I believe.
So it will be right on this property?
I think it's further to the west, and you can look at some of the folks out there who are kind of nodding along. It's further to the west from here.
It is further to the west and off the map, but it would impact these properties, these large properties.
Yeah. And, as you heard my concerns and trying to react to the neighborhood out there, I hope that whoever makes the motion would stipulate about the fencing and about non-use of Foxdale as an entrance to this.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. What would be a citizen's recourse if, they come home and there are 1,000 people out there? Just curious.
Again, under the context and the confines of the UDO and this rezoning action, if it were so approved recommended for approval by you and by the elected body, not a lot, because again, there are no caps and those kind of things. Now, if they are violating noise ordinances, if they have, violating other nuisance regulations, then, those things would come into play, but it would be a police enforcement issue versus a zoning enforcement issue. Again, if they repeatedly had, let's say, music events out there and essentially were treating it like a, music amphitheater, then there are regulations in the UDO specifically related to entertainment facilities and those kind of things. I mean, again, if they're having a one-off kind of, bluegrass festival out there for a day, I think that could be done under the special event center. If they were having weekly concerts where, they were having 500 to 1,000 people out there, then, we wouldn't classify that as a special event center. We would classify that as what I just call, what's the use I'm looking for, Desmond?
We have a large entertainment facility.
Large entertainment, yeah. So it really would just depend. So again, it could be a zoning violation, but if it's just, noise and excessive noise, trash, those kind of things, it would just be a nuisance thing with the police and or community development.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions for staff?
Not really a question, but I think my main concern is how close that driveway and the activity of the driveway and the lights are to the residences adjacent. If it were on the other side of the property, I wouldn't be as concerned as I am about how this could affect the neighborhood with that. And listening to the opposition, hearing the bringing people you don't know this close to your property on a regular basis, the light, the potential for noise. I think those are significant things we need to consider. The intent seems to be it's going to be a low-key family place, and that, but I think you have to look at, I think like you said, if that family leaves, what happens? What are the ultimate controls that you can have that are in place?
Okay.
And sort of nuisance things where you call for noise or something like that, there doesn't seem to be a lot of other options. So, I mean, I think it's a great use of the property, and you love to see property put in use like that. I'm really struggling with how certain parts of it are so close to the neighbors.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right. What is the pleasure of the board in this case?
Can we get Mr. Causey back up here for a second?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Causey, I understand is Ms. Earls, am I pronouncing that correctly? It is Ms. Earls.
Earls, yes.
Okay. So the house, she's the third or the fourth property?
It's about where the driveway comes down and begins to turn south, about the fourth property, I believe is correct.
But the
Third. Yep.
The petitioners own the last two houses currently on Foxdale that you come to if you're driving to the west on Foxdale. Is that what I heard earlier in the presentation?
The Stovall's and the Nance's are the last two, like, smaller residential lots, but after the 1, 2, 3, 4, after the fifth lot, it becomes the Bradford property. Is that?
I'm trying to get an idea of how long a fence might have to be extended. I'm trying to get an idea of.
Yeah, an extension of the fence might make it less intense on the homeowners.
Right.
And I'm going to point out kind of where the fence got situated where it did. We kind of came down to the limits of the 20-foot buffer where the road encroached into the buffer. About where the drive turns south, we could widen out to a 100-foot buffer. Consequently, we stopped the fence at that point because we could provide the wider 100-foot wide type 3 buffer. So point being, if the fence needed to continue down, I think that's certainly something for consideration. The Earls being the third, there'd be at least 3 more properties, Mr. Lamb, before it got down to the Bradford property.
So is that another?
Several hundred feet.
Yeah, 300
about 350 maybe.
Yeah, 350 feet would get you down past the last
Yep,
improvement
absolutely.
on one of those lots on the left.
I will point out, I don't think it's a problem that would extend down into the floodplain. In theory, the fence could damage or restrict the floodplain, but I think they're collapsible. I don't think there's anything that would prohibit that fence down there, Chris. I don't.
Well, what I was going to say is, you could perhaps look at extending the fence that would get to Miss Earls, but what you could also do is, in addition to that, if the board were so inclined and the petitioner was agreeable, is you could actually also take that fence and run it down the driveway for a certain distance that then kind of keeps the lights in, the headlights. It kind of funnels people and prevents them from standing there and looking at the Earls property and other folks' property. It kind of funnels them down to the activity area, and that way you wouldn't hopefully have folks who are just stopping up there and gazing or doing whatever they're doing. I think it would help funnel folks to have that fence also follow that drive, at least for a portion of that drive on the way down.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate we're not talking about, a 20,000 square foot facility here, so I certainly appreciate adding any incremental cost is a substantial percentage of the total, project out there. But at the same time is, 50, 75 feet down the northernmost boundary of that drive, something that might be acceptable to.
Certainly reasonable, very reasonable, I think, in that regard. And Chris, remind me, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in times or situations like this where we've tried to agree to conditions that may limit the size or the capacity or the hours, this really becomes an enforcement issue. It's difficult to enforce. I think we certainly could demonstrate some restriction of capacity and use, but my understanding is heretofore, that's just difficult.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, that's why we try to not write anything with such limits in the ordinance, because we don't have staff that work on the weekends when these things would primarily be used. We don't have folks that work at night. Hours of operation limitations are always difficult for our staff, because you're looking at, some of those things, 11, 12, 1 o'clock, at night, and we don't have staff that's working. So then whenever they complain, it's either we have to have proof, which again, you have to verify, or we have to send folks out to work at night. And, with our limited staff, we just don't have the ability to do that.
And Ms. Earls obviously is correct. There is a light, and it's shown on the site plan right in the turn of that road. So it has been positioned right there at the corner of our property. So.
Thank you, Mr. Cause. I think he's done with you. All right.
I'm ready to make a motion.
All right, if you'd like to make a motion.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and then I'm going to add some conditions if that part passes.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Lamb and a second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Hey,
3-3. Oops.
So that was on the consistency. 3-3.
Yes, 3-3.
Okay. All right, then I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3523 with the added condition that the petitioner extend the planned fencing along the northern and western, that they extend it along the northern and western boundary of this drive, past what they're planning on fencing now, another
350.
75 feet along that, and that would be the additional condition.
All right, we have a motion with conditions.
Would you consider adding the non-use of Foxdale Drive to access the property?
I think he was agreeable to that.
Yeah, okay, and adding the condition that
No access.
Foxdale Drive is not permitted to be an access to this property. I don't know if that's adequately stating it or not, but.
Yeah, well, no access to the special event center from Foxdale.
Yeah, Foxdale, okay, all right. So that's my motion.
So we have a motion and a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 4-2.
4-2, okay.
All right, thank you.
And if you hold on a second, I'm trying to write these motions down.
All right. Did you get those in favor and those in?
I did, but I had written so many notes over where I normally write the motions that I had to create my own down here. So,
All right.
Okay, I've got it now. Mr. Chairman of the Board, I believe that concludes the items on the agenda.
All right.
Under staff report, I do have a few things. First of all, I will turn to Kirk, who will give you a preview of our work session coming up 2 weeks from today.
Thank you, Chris. Again, good evening, board members. We have a couple of things so far for work session. The first is we're going to have our annual report from the Historic Resources Commission. One of the commission members will come and present that to the board and explain some of the markers and other things that they've done in the past year. The main event is going to be kind of a board kickoff discussion on the new comprehensive plan that we've been talking to you all about conceptually for a while, and it's been in the work program. But Amy Crum is going to take us through kind of a literature review that staff has done to see what's the state of the art in comprehensive plans in the last couple of years, and go over some next steps and kind of an outline of what staff will be doing for the next few months. So that's what we have for now. There's also the potential we may have the CAC give you their annual report as well. But I'll turn it back to you, Chris.
All right. Thank you. Next, I'll turn to Desmond, who'll give you a preview of your May cases. And of course, we had several items continue today, and I believe we have a fairly large number that have walked through the door for May. So.
Yes, it's busy season. We will have 9 rezoning cases next month, including the one that was continued today. There is another one that you've seen multiple times before on Cole Road between Walltown Street and Sprague Street. That was remanded from the city council again in February, I think. So those 2 are included in the 9. And then we have 1 special use permit for a parking exception on Brookstown Avenue. And then we have 3 planning board review items, 2 of which were continued from this month, another subdivision. And then there's an additional preliminary subdivision. It's a commercial subdivision and Innovation Quarter.
All right. And then finally, under the last item I have on the staff report is just an invitation and a mention of we do have 2 marker unveilings that will take place over the next 2.5 weeks. On Saturday, the 23rd at 10 a.m., the Winston-Salem Rescue Squad marker will be unveiled, and that's going to be at 2995 Liberty Street. And then the following Saturday, on April 30th at 3 p.m. at 420 South Broad, and that's that's at Broad Street, close to the open space area in front of Carolina University. The St. Philip's Moravian marker unveiling will be had there. And for those that don't know, that is the location of the original St. Philip's Church. That's where they began meeting, and then, of course, they constructed the St. Philip's at the end of Church Street in Old Salem before they moved, I believe, across the creek over to the Happy Hill area, I believe, at some point. I'm not sure exactly what that time frame was, but that's why the marker unveiling is being held there at Carolina University, because that's where the actual first St. Philip's Church was located. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Again, thank you, Ms. Councilmember Scipio, for joining us today. I'd also like to thank the planning staff for our coming back together, and things have gone very seamless. So thank you very kindly. And for those citizens who are not aware, I think the last time we met, Mr. Murphy was the acting planning director. And after an extensive search and the planning board's recommendation, Mr. Murphy is now officially our new city planning director.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think everyone on the planning board is confident in your abilities, and after a search, you continue to rise to the top. So thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it would be worth 5 minutes anyway at a work session or something to talk about permitted uses in ag. It is so much closer to it's so much closer to GI than it is.
It's so much closer to no regulations.
Right. And I think it's worth going through that permitted use list and talking about how heavy some of the uses can be in ag, because we're going to see more and more suburban encroachment on ag. And when ag wants to continue being able to do the things that ag wants to do, developers need to, not developers, but we need to be aware of that when we start researching.
As long as we don't need an extensive presentation, I believe we probably can add that for the April meeting. We can just have a discussion on it.
Right, 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
We'll have our motion to adjourn.
All right. There we go. Thank you all. Have a positive evening.